What's up, Make Pop Music? It's Austin here from Make Pop Music and Austin Hall Audio and Visual, and we are back with another video. And this video is coming on the first of the year, so Happy New Year to everybody. I hope you have a better year than 2020. I know it was a rough one for a lot of us, and I know that just because it's a new day and it's a new year doesn't mean a lot's changing, but it does still feel like a fresh start for a lot of us, so Happy New Year. Hopefully big things are coming for you. I know we have a ton of stuff planned on the channel. We have a ton of content planned for you, so we're super excited. But before we get too much into focusing on what's gonna happen in 2021, I did wanna take a chance to recap. We get so many questions on what gear I use, what plugins I like, what guitars and mics I use, so I figured I would just end 2020 by doing a recap of my absolute favorites of the year. We're gonna go over some of my favorite VST instruments, we're gonna go over some of my favorite VST actual plugins and effects, then we're gonna go over some extra studio stuff, like what are my favorite mics, guitars, what are some extra little studio features that I couldn't live without this year, and then by the end of the video you should have a grasp on some of the things that I'm leaning towards. You've probably seen a lot of these already mentioned on the channel, so if there were any that you guessed, let me know in the comments below which ones you knew were going to make it onto the list, and if there are any that surprised you, let me know in the comments below which ones were kind of a shock to you. But without further ado, let's actually hop in and talk about what my favorites of 2020 were. So let's start with my favorite virtual instruments. This is going to be any kind of synth VST, drum VST, anything like that. Of course, coming in at number one, I'm sure if you've watched our channel, you'll guess it, is Serum by X4 Records. It's my most used synth. I use it all the time. We make and sell presets for that synth. To me, it's just super easy. It's really easy to cover on the channel because it's very visual and it's super easy to acquire with the payment plan from Splice. And I know most of y'all already have it, so that's the reason that we use it so much and I use it in my productions. Really, really versatile synth. I couldn't live without Serum. It's by far my number one plugin that I've probably ever used. Coming in at number two is going to be Omnisphere by Spectrasonics. Honestly, I'm pretty new to the Spectrasonics game. I think I got Omnisphere last year on Black Friday, and I've loved it ever since. I really dove into it heavy this year and really started messing with it. There's just so much stuff you can do with it, even though it's more of a rumpler instead of an actual synthesizer. There's still so much mixing and matching and so many really cool sounds. And some honorable mentions, I did recently just get Trillion and Keyscape, and both of those so far have been absolutely amazing, but I haven't used them quite enough to throw them on to my absolute favorites of 2020 list. But all of the Spectrasonic stuff is top notch. Coming in at number three for my most used virtual instruments is going to be the Analog Lab bundle from Arturia. You'll probably see me use it quite a bit. I love the more retro modded kind of synths and keys. I really think it's a nice way to tie in some of those more vintage kind of aesthetic sounds, especially when you don't want something as clean or polished as Serum and you don't want something as weird or atmospheric as Omnisphere. Analog Lab is really cool for just diving in and finding those sounds that feel really tried and true in pop music. You've got all of the vintage 80s Oberheim stuff, you've got like the Jupiters, you've got all of that kind of stuff. So if you're looking to get kind of retro analog synths, I think Analog Lab is probably the best value for that. And my honorable mention for VST instruments is going to be Anna 2. Anna 2 is by Sonic Academy and it's in the Slate bundle now. I love this synth. It's very similar to Serum. It's just actually got a couple more features that I find useful. It's got a couple extra samplers, which I really like. The only reason I tend to lean towards Serum a little bit more, especially on the channel, is because it's a little bit easier to visually understand and follow. And I know a lot more of our subscribers and viewers have Serum to follow along, but Anna 2 is still amazing. We actually have some free presets and we've included Anna presets in a couple packs this past year. So I really like it and I'm sure I'll be using it more in 2021. All right, now let's move into my favorite plugin effects. So this is going to be compressors, EQs, everything like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to break it into three companies, and then within each of those companies, I'm going to say some of my favorites that I have from them. So of course, coming in at number one is going to be Slate. I've been loving the Slate All Access bundle this past year. As y'all probably seen on the channel, I use a ton of the stuff. In the Slate bundle, I'm really loving the 116 compressors that they have, very similar to like an 1176. So they end up on almost anything. I'm really loving the 2A editions that they just added recently and the Fresh Air edition that they added recently. Before that, I was using the Air module within VMR a ton, and I use their virtual bus compressors on pretty much everything. And then you have some of the other cool effects in there like Verb Suite, which is really nice. It's my go-to reverb. And then you've also got the Kilohertz bundle that they're including now. So y'all probably see me use the Haas effect a bunch, the Tape Stop effect a bunch, and I use Multipass a ton. So all of that comes in at that one price for the Slate bundle. So to me, that was the best value of 2020. I think that you could do an entire mix with only that bundle. And it's super affordable. They're really good quality, and the Slate team is just amazing. We've worked with them a couple times, and I really enjoy every time we do. This video is not sponsored, and these are all of my own opinions, but Slate is probably coming in at number one for my favorite plugins of the year. And then coming in at number two is going to be FabFilter. anything that Slate's not doing, I typically lean to FabFilter for. So I love Pro Q3. It's my favorite EQ of all time. I really love the dynamic features. I really love the side chaining features. And to me, it's nice to be able to add endless bands. And I just feel like I can get a little bit more pinpointed and precise in there. I don't know. I just really feel like I couldn't live without Pro Q3. I could honestly probably do almost an entire mix with just that one plugin. And then also in the FabFilter bundles that I have, I really, really love Pro L2. It's my limiter of choice. It ends up on every mix and master that I do. I did upgrade from Pro L1 this year, and Pro L2 has been amazing. I really love their true peak limiting, and I love some of the extra options that they have. And then outside of that, I've been starting to use Pro R more. It's a reverb, so anything that I'm not going to Slate Verb Suite for, I tend to go to Pro R for. So I like Verb Suite from the Slate bundle for a couple more kind of organic, natural, warm sounding reverbs like rooms and plates and stuff like that. And if I'm wanting anything a little bit longer or a little bit cleaner or a little bit more sculpted, that's where I'll go to something like Pro R, and I'll be able to tie that in. So FabFilter is an amazing company. We've never worked with them, but I do know that I love working with any of their plugins. So if you're looking for something that's just super clean and super modern and super easy to navigate, definitely check out FabFilter. All right, and the last category for my favorite plugins is going to be others. I've been using RC20 a ton this year. To me, it's just really easy to add a nice little bit of vibe and uniqueness to a track. If I have a bell sample or I have a guitar sample or something and I really want to give it some extra crunch or some extra grit or depth, I can just throw RC20 on there and really make it work, and I can get something fun and exciting. I also love movement by output. I've been using that a lot. It's kind of this weird like multi-band delay meets saturation. It really does some crazy stuff. They've got some insane presets. It can be a little difficult to navigate, so honestly most of the time I just flip through presets until I find one, and then I'll just kind of tweak it from there. But movement is a really cool way to add some ear candy into your tracks, especially if you're trying to get something more than just a standard delay or a filter or some kind of random saturation. Next is going to be Auto-Tune Pro. As y'all saw me review earlier this year, I love the Auto-Tune bundle, but the one that I absolutely can't live without is Auto-Tune Pro. It ends up on all of my vocal mixes. I love that I can go in and graph tune it if I need to, but I hardly ever do that. I normally just flip it to the key of the song, set the retune speed and the humanize, and then really just let it rock. It sounds great to me. It just gets that vocal right in that little tuned pocket. And if you're really good at finessing the retune speed, you can get it to sound pretty natural and not be an absolute, you know, just T-Pain extravaganza. All right, so now that we've talked about the favorite plugins in my computer, let's go ahead and talk about some of my favorite studio gear from this past year, because that is a big part of how I run my whole setup. So coming in at number one for my studio is going to be the new desk that I got this year. That to me has been an absolute game changer, because I'm able to have all of my gear within arm's reach, where I used to have my big Roland keyboard separated. I had a keyboard on top. Everything was a little deep and my neck was always hurting from craning down. So working with AZ Studio Workstations this year to get a new desk was absolutely a dream. I moved into a new spot when we bought this house, so it was really nice to basically move a new desk in as soon as I got this room, and ever since then I've just gotten so accustomed to working with it. I don't think I'll ever go back to anything else. I really love having a dedicated studio workstation specifically built for my kind of workflow. Speaking of the desk, another favorite of 2020 was actually my Roland Juno DS88. I've had it for a couple years now, but I wasn't able to use it too much because I did have it on a shelf to the side of my studio, so I would very rarely find myself getting up to go track something over there. Sometimes I would go play it over there, but this year I ended up upgrading my ins and outs for my computer, so I actually have the Roland Juno DS88 right under my desk, and I'm able to play it at all times because it's got two stereo ends going into my speakers, and then I've also got it hooked up to my DAW. So being able to really utilize that on my new desk has been an absolute dream. I've been tracking with it a lot more. I play with it all the time just to write to outside of my DAW. So if you're looking for something that could be a really cool writing tool, I definitely would suggest getting a keyboard that has some onset sounds. That way you don't have to fire up a DAW anytime that you want to like lay down a piano idea or kind of lay down some chords. It's really nice to just go over, turn it on, not have to turn on anything else, and play a nice little melody. So that's been an absolute game changer this year. I really love using that. Another favorites from this year has been all of the treatment that I have in my new room. If you're familiar with GIK, you probably recognized immediately that they did the entire room. So I actually reached out. I had one of their acousticians basically draw up my room with all of my dimensions and all of my gear. They drew it up, sent me everything that I need, and it was pretty expensive. It was definitely an investment, but it all looks pretty good. It sounds amazing. I did actually have an issue with quality control, which they never really resolved, so I'm still a little bit bitter about that, especially with how much I spent on all of the treatment. So I don't know if I'd be the first to recommend actually going with GIK just because of the quality control issues, especially at such a high price. However, now that I have it and I've just learned to live with the couple issues that they did have, they absolutely sound amazing, which is the most important thing in a studio. And I've never had any guests or artists or anything like that ever pick apart the things that I was kind of really nitpicky on. So not a super deal breaker, just a little disappointing when I spent the budget, but the room sounds absolutely incredible, which is most important. Another thing I couldn't live without this year was a couple mics. As you've probably seen on the channel a couple times, I'm normally using one of two mics. I'm either using the JZ BH1 or the Slate VMS with their ML1 mic. So I really like both of them. To me, the Slate is really versatile. I couldn't really live without it because sometimes I'm tracking a vocalist that's a little bit different and I just need something that's a little bit different character-wise. However, if you could only afford one mic and you didn't want to go the digital route with something like Slate, I really think that the JZ BH1 is going to be the option that you should go for, especially when they're running their sales. It's a super clean mic. You can use it on almost any source. I've never had it sound bad on a recording. So if I ever want something that's a little bit more simple than the Slate VMS, where I'm going to have to find a mic after the fact, I'll immediately just throw on my JZ mic and I'm just good to go from there. So definitely needed both of those mics in my life this year because I've used them a ton. And then another thing that I got late last year, but I really put into use this year, was my Fender Strat. I really like having a Fender. I've had a Gibson before, I've had a couple other guitars, and to me, I'm just doing so much pop stuff, I really needed that kind of signature pop tone that you're gonna get from that Strat. So if y'all have heard any kind of pop tutorials on the channel where you have that kind of plucky, dreamy guitar, that was definitely done from the Fender, so that was also an absolute essential. And then the last couple things that I want to talk about are definitely studio related, but they're more so workflow and just kind of health related. I recently got a water bottle. It's from Hydrate, not sponsored or anything, but my wife got it for me for Christmas. It's basically a smart water bottle that'll tell me when I need to drink. It'll keep track of how much I drink in a day. I have a really bad problem about getting super dehydrated when I work. I'll normally come into the studio, forget that I don't have water, or I'll drink all the water and forget to refill it. And then by the end of the day, it's 6 p.m. and all I've had to drink is one bottle of water, and I'm slamming a Mountain Dew at the time. So it's really bad for me. I'm really glad that now I have a water bottle that can remind me. And if you have a problem keeping up with your water intake through the day, I would highly suggest it. It is a little pricey, but to me, it's so worth it to actually build the habit of just getting into drinking a lot of water, because that is one of the most important things you can do for your health. And then my last studio essential is something that I'm actually rolling into the new year with, and that is a journal and a notebook. I've never been a big write it by hand person. However, I've started doing that pretty recently, and I'm starting to write mix revisions by hand. When I have sales calls, I'm starting to write client notes by hand. So I'm really enjoying writing by hand, and I actually got a new journal for the year. So I'm keeping track of all of my goals. I'm keeping track of my weekly schedule. I'm keeping track of my habits. And to me, if you have trouble kind of staying motivated or kind of keeping up with everything that's going on in your life, especially if you're really busy or if you're just doing music on the side and you have a job, I definitely think invest in a good journal and planner and actually put some time in. Some are really big. They'll take an hour a week to do, and if you like doing that, more power to you. The one that I got, I honestly can knock out my whole week in 10 minutes, and then every morning I spend 5 minutes just while I'm eating a piece of toast, and then I'm good for the day. Definitely invest in some of those things that are not super fun, but they definitely contribute to some of your health and some of your well-being. And that's gonna do it for my 2020 favorites studio edition. I loved all of the stuff that I talked about. I used it a ton. Y'all have probably seen most of it on the channel before, so I appreciate you sitting through the video. Hopefully this answers any questions that a lot of y'all have, but we will be back next week with new tutorials, so I'm really excited for 2021. I hope that all of y'all have had a very happy holidays. I hope you're having a good new year. Much love, everyone, and peace out.